Hi, my name is Dasha Pruss. I just defended my PhD at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm excited to share my qualitative research on risk assessment instruments. In July 2020, the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission adopted a new risk assessment tool that's used at sentencing. And the way the tool works is it estimates an individual's risk of reconviction within 3 years based on association of demographic factors and past data. And these demographic factors include age, gender, prior convictions, current conviction offense type, and prior juvenile record. And the more statistically associated these factors are with the outcome, the larger weight they are assigned in the final risk score. So for instance, young age is assigned 5 risk points. These weights are summed up to make a risk score, which is then binned into qualitative categories. And for low and high risk defendants, the tool recommends ordering a pre-sentence investigation report, which is a document prepared by a probation officer that contains more information about the defendant. And the idea here is that the judge may use this information to assign an alternate sentence to low or high risk individuals. And the motivation behind this instrument is grounded in this criminal justice reform movement in the US called the evidence-based sentencing movement. The idea is that these instruments will make sentencing more consistent, and they will allow judges to identify dangerous individuals who can be incarcerated while releasing people who pose no threat to society. This is presented as a potential partial solution to the crisis of mass incarceration. Recently, however, these types of instruments have become notorious for being racially biased. Most people by now have heard of the Compass audit done by ProPublica. And in the Pennsylvania case, there was overwhelmingly negative public testimony from high-profile sources like the ACLU, who called the tool racist, as well as local justice reform organizations who argued that the tool would perpetuate the racial biases and stigmas in our criminal legal system. Now, both of these types of perspectives buy into what I call AI hype narratives about risk assessment instruments disrupting sentencing. So one is that they're an evidence-based solution to mass incarceration, and the other is that they are going to make an already structurally racist system even more racist in these strong ways. And both of these perspectives tend to assume that human judgment will be automated by these types of tools. But in practice, judges use these types of instruments selectively for different types of defendants, and they differ widely in their degree of adherence to the instrument. And in light of this evidence in other states, what I wondered in Pennsylvania was how judges were actually using and interpreting the recommendations of this instrument. So what I did is I conducted interviews with 15 judges in different counties statewide, as well as several probation officers and members of the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission who developed the tool. I also collaborated with a grassroots organization called the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration that's composed of formerly incarcerated individuals and their families. This is a photo taken at a rally last year. And the effort was to prioritize communities impacted by incarceration, to prioritize their interest and knowledge in this project. So what I found was that across all counties, judges overwhelmingly ignored this instrument. But I saw a wide range of reasons for why they resisted the tool. And the thing that I think is most interesting about this study is that most existing research on algorithm aversion has focused on individualistic explanations centering around distrust of technology or fears of automation or surveillance. But these types of reasons I found only played a minor role in this case. And I also found that there were some unexpected potential consequences of the tool's adoption. So the first common reason that judges didn't use the tool was simply that they didn't find it to be helpful. They disparaged the tool as useless, worthless, boring, a waste of time, a non-thing, and simply not helpful. And the primary reason for this is that the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission removed various parts of the instruments in response to public scrutiny. The final version, as I mentioned, recommends ordering a pre-sentence investigation report for low and high risk defendants. Most judges were not interested in changing when they order the reports. They would order these reports for more serious crimes in most cases. And it also depended on how useful judges found the reports in the first place. which varies a lot county to county. There's different policies in different places. Most judges also said they would have preferred to see other types of information at sentencing time rather than risk information, such as the causal impacts of different sentencing practices on recidivism or information about how that tool derived the information. Another common reason judges didn't use the tool was simply that they didn't know what the tool did or where to find its recommendations or how to use it at all. As one judge put it, I never knew where that information was going to be provided for me. Was it going to come in an email, a news blog, a winter weather alert? I had no idea. To give you some reference, this is the actual form that judges see. And this box that says NA is where the recommendation appears. This is what one judge called the world's least user-friendly form. And judges also never received training about how to use the tool. The commission told me that this was because the campaign had been derailed, coinciding with the start of the pandemic. But when I spoke to judges, I really saw systemic problems with how information is disseminated to judges. As one illustration, one judge I interviewed in person told me that they were actually attending a virtual training session during our interview. There were also other complementary concerns that came up about risk assessment instruments later on in the interview, including concerns that the tools ignore a defendant's humanity, concerns about racial bias of the tool, and concerns that the tool is worse than experienced judges. As one judge put it, I was elected to be a judge, not a robot. But these types of concerns were secondary to the other concerns I've already mentioned, and they usually were expressed in alongside an otherwise pro-data stance. Judges really did want data and more information to be used at sentencing, just not the type of information that they were getting. And finally, many judges expressed concerns that this instrument could have various unexpected downstream consequences if it were to be used. For instance, although the tool doesn't mention risk levels directly, people know it's called the risk tool. If it says additional information, there may be some concern about how dangerous the defendant is. And data from other states suggests that judges tend to use risk information to detain defendants longer. There was also concern that low-risk defendants could be detained longer pre-trial because of how long it takes to order a report. As one judge put it, I'm not letting the defendant sit 8 more weeks in jail just because some computer program said so. And probation officers I talked with also worried that the tool could slow down this already backlogged sentencing process. So in sum, we saw these AI hype narratives that we started with, but in practice, this algorithmic reform really has no impact at all. All it does is it adds another layer to the system that's already sluggish and bureaucratic. And an internal impact assessment conducted by the Commission on Sentencing supports my finding as well. So the upshots for AI studies is that we need to be thinking about algorithm aversion from a more organizational perspective, because what I found was that judges resist the tool, but not for the types of reasons we normally see in this literature that focus on distrust and fear. The 3 organizational factors that explain the instrument's non-use have to do with different county-level norms about the reports, changes made to the instrument in response to public resistance, and problems with how information is disseminated to judges. If we understand resistance to technology from an organizational perspective, we're going to be better able to capture real-world cases of algorithm aversion. And finally, my research supports an empirically supported argument against the use of risk assessment instruments, which holds upshots for criminal justice policy. In practice, these reforms have no significant impacts on sentencing, and this is corroborated by research in other states. They're resource intensive to develop. This tool took 10 years to develop and was developed with taxpayer money. And in practice, they're rubber stamp reforms. They allow the legislature to say that some measure has been taken when in fact these instruments don't really do much. And low-tech liberatory changes that are grounded in abolition, such as ending cash bail and releasing elderly populations from prison, have more robust empirical support, are not costly, and immediately reduce prison populations. Okay, thank you very much.